For today's video, I came up with a very unique challenge. I'm looking for my two favorite games for each genre, and yes, I have to limit myself to 2 titles. I can tell you, for a few genres it was relatively easy, but for most of them I spent ages thinking it over. If you're up for it, then feel free to share in the comments how you would have decided. And with these words I would say we start into the video, have fun, and welcome to the Switch Gems channel. Action. For me, I would say this genre has been the most difficult because there are still countless subgenres here. I even included one of these subgenres as its own genre for this video, more on that later. For one, I decided to go with Diablo 2 Resurrected. Again, strictly speaking, we would still have the RPG genre included as a second genre. I think this is actually the most controversial decision of the whole video, but I simply associate a lot with this game and the whole franchise. Already the first part tied me to my PC for hundreds of hours in my younger years, and with Diablo 2 or Diablo 2 Lord of Destruction, the franchise burned itself into my gamer heart. Resurrected is an extremely solid port in my eyes, the controls have been adapted to the controller very well, and it just feels like it did back then. Just visually spruced up. Especially in the first few months, the online support was absolutely horrible, but fortunately Blizzard has fixed most of the problems in the meantime. So to be really honest, there's a lot of nostalgia attached to this decision. Now that you know that I'm a huge Diablo fan, the second game shouldn't surprise you too much. Here I decided to pick Hades. Hades has certain parallels to Diablo, but plays much differently. As you might know, it's a roguelike game that sees you play as the son of Hades, fighting your way through the underworld to escape and reach the surface. The worlds are completely regenerated with each run, which makes for a high replay factor. Hades is the epitome of action for me and is definitely one of the best indie games of all time. Action adventure. In this genre it was also super hard for me to limit myself to 2 titles. Of course, it was quickly clear to me that The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom had to go in. The 2 games only take up 1 spot for me, anything else would be unfair to the other games. I don't think I need to waste too many words here either, every Switch owner should know about these fantastic games. These large, immersive open worlds, the excellent narrative with the beautiful soundtrack, and the countless innovative gameplay elements make both parts absolute masterpieces in my eyes. I struggled with the second title, but ultimately decided on Monster Hunter Rise. Again, RPG comes as a subgenre. Monster Hunter Rise is visually one of the most beautiful Switch games for me, especially the incredibly impressive monsters and the battles against them are both challenging and satisfying. Again, the soundtrack perfectly underscores the atmosphere. For me, Rise and Sunbreak are the best Monster Hunter games of all time. Fighting. When it comes to fighting games, it gets a bit thinner again, especially when it comes to really good fighting games. My clear favorite and probably even my favorite fighting game of all time is definitely Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. Countless fighters and stages, classic mode adapted to the fighters, fast gameplay and strong multiplayer. These are just a few things that make Super Smash Bros. Ultimate stand out. It's just a bit of a shame that some fighters have virtually the same moves and thus play alike. But with such a high number, it's difficult to completely customize every single character. Smash Bros. Is definitely a must-buy for every fan of fighting games. I gave the second slot to Mortal Kombat 11, though this slot would most likely be replaced by Mortal Kombat 1 in a few weeks. Mortal Kombat is definitely one of the bloodiest games that have made it to the Switch. In good old Tekken style, you can bash each other's head in Mortal Kombat 11 with a total of 25 different fighters. And with Mortal Kombat you can actually take bashing heads in literally. In any case, I'm very excited about Mortal Kombat 1, which will be released in September. First-person shooter. Even a few good shooters have made it to the family-friendly console. First and foremost, of course, is the great Splatoon series. Nintendo has managed to create a shooter that parents can buy for their children with a clear conscience. Especially the great multiplayer mode made sure that the second part of the series is one of the best-selling Switch games of all time. The third part is also well on its way, so if you're looking for a shooter of a different kind, you should take a closer look here. The second slot I gave to a game that I know from my childhood or youth. Metroid Prime got a remastered version at the beginning of the year and the execution was absolutely outstanding in my opinion. I played the original version on the GameCube over 20 years ago and to me, remastered versions ideally feel the same as they did back then. Much like Diablo 2 Resurrected, that is absolutely the case here. Everything has been finely tweaked, but at its core it's still the same game. So I can recommend Metroid Prime Remastered not only to fans of the original, but to any fan of FPS games without exception. Jump and Run. Here the selection is once again very extensive. Since I'm not the biggest jump and run fan myself, the choice was relatively easy for me. The first game I chose was probably the best title in the genre in recent years, Super Mario Odyssey. My first video game ever was actually Super Mario Land for the Game Boy. Accordingly, Mario introduced me to the world of gaming. Super Mario Odyssey covers so much of what makes a good platform adventure. A huge and above all varied game world, great graphics, perfected gameplay and a large amount of content, meaning a long playtime. Another game that surprised me in a positive way recently was Sonic Frontiers. The last Sonic game I really liked was actually Sonic Adventure 2 Battle for the Nintendo GameCube. As you can see, I was and I am a big GameCube fan. The new open world approach made me skeptical on the one hand, but curious on the other. Even if the implementation on the Switch is not quite optimal in my opinion, I had great fun with this game. The gameplay was fresh, Sonic settled into his first open world pretty well, and some new moves were really fun. In the long run the gameplay became a bit too repetitive for me, but apart from that, I think the franchise is going in the right direction. RPG. In the meantime, there's a huge selection of super strong RPG games. I was honestly most impressed by the Octopath Traveler series. I really love the graphic style, the different stories of the protagonists are compellingly written, and the turn-based battle system is very well implemented. Octopath Traveler looks super modern on the one hand, but still reminds me of JRPGs of the good old 16-bit era. Anyone who enjoys games of this type should definitely give these two titles a try. An absolute surprise hit for me was Pokémon Legends. I'm a huge Pokémon fan and have been since the very beginning. Accordingly, I have of course also followed the evolution of the main games and was disappointed again and again with the recent games. So I went into Legends with rather low expectations and was completely surprised. For the first time in years, the franchise breaks its somewhat dusty formula and basically provides us with exactly the game we've been waiting for years. A more adult and open game world with completely new catchy mechanics and above all, free of arenas and fixed predetermined sequences. The whole world, even if it looks rather modest graphically, is much more immersive than that of recent titles. Even the difficulty level is also a bit higher than in its previous games. It's too bad that Scarlet and Violet didn't carry over some of the great innovations. The direction was definitely right. More of this game. Simulation. A genre that a few years ago I wouldn't have thought could ever interest me as much as it does today. With Animal Crossing New Horizons for the first time, I felt how relaxing such life simulations are and how well you can switch off thanks to such games. You decide for yourself at what pace you want to play. You design your environment completely by yourself and decide what you want to do and when. No stressful questing and no aggressive opponents who are after our lives. No frustration, no hustle, just you, your island and your imagination. With Stardew Valley, the whole thing was intensified a bit more for me. The pixel graphics immediately caught me, and the great written characters who get their quirks through different dialogues and daily routines convinced me right away. The same applies here as for Animal Crossing. You design the game completely according to your own ideas. I decide for myself whether I'd rather farm today or whether I'd rather go armed through dungeons. I decide which NPC I want to connect with and who I want to pin my ring on at the end. And above all, I decide for myself at what pace I do all of this. Simulation games like this are an absolute dream for casuals, and for me the perfect games to just switch off after work. Sports. I'm actually one of the few who never got bogged down in the FIFA swamp. I was less interested in sports games, I prefer to be active myself. However, there was and is one exception, Tony Hawk's. I already played the first two parts on the PlayStation back in the day. All the more I was happy about the remakes of the two parts, and oh man, these remakes are incredibly well done. Graphically, the two games are, in my opinion, among the best on the console, and the gameplay has been perfected but still feels like it did back then. Above all, the game is just as motivating as it was back then. I couldn't put the game down until I had reached 100% in both parts. Absolute recommendation for every Tony Hawk fan. What also surprised me positively was Ring Fit Adventure. I'm basically a big fan of gamification, hence the level system for my channel. By the way, we've reached level 26 by now. You can find more information in my shorts. Ring Fit is in my eyes the first motivating sports game that really works the way the developer intended. As already mentioned in the last video, I would love to see a sequel to this game, and the high sales figures should be incentive enough for the developers. Have you tried Ring Fit Adventure yet? Strategy. This is the genre I've devoted myself to the least since I became a console gamer. Games like Age of Empires or Civilization have only ever worked for me in combination with a mouse and a keyboard. Here, in fact, only one game came to my mind that I enjoyed on the Switch as well. And again, we are dealing with a remake of an old classic, namely Advance Wars 1 and 2 Reboot Camp. I played the first part up and down on my Game Boy Advance more than 20 years ago. The mixture of tactical role-playing elements and strategic gameplay paired with a breeze of humor pleased me extremely well. The remakes also pick up where the original games left off. Unfortunately, I have to say that the gameplay actually bored me a bit these days. The execution is basically really well done. I think it's more me and my personal shift in interests over all these years. I probably just don't belong to the target group anymore. One game that should probably be mentioned here is Pikmin 4. I myself have unfortunately never been able to find my way into this franchise and have not yet played the fourth part. What do you think about Pikmin, and have you already tried the newest installment? Wow, not an easy challenge at all. In any case, it's clear that this topic is absolutely subjective and your list would probably look completely different. Basically, what do you think of my list and what would yours look like? Let's chat a bit in the comments. If you enjoyed the video, I'd appreciate a thumbs up and a free subscription to my channel. Thanks again for checking in, and see you next time on Switch Gems.